Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Guam Police Department. I want to thank everybody for making it here to the press conference this morning regarding the Uniform Crime Report, or the Guam Police Department's Uniform Crime Report for 2016. But before I get into a discussion regarding the UCR, I'd like to first address a particular issue regarding the Guam Police Department's executive security section and the detail that was provided for the First Lady, which happened several weeks ago. So in providing this discussion, I'd like to point out that Title 10, Chapter 77, specifically subsection 77101, which talks about the authority of the Guam Police Department, specifically gives the Chief of Police the authority to adopt an internal standard operating procedure, general orders or directives, administrative and operational standards, which are all subject to the administrative adjudication law, rules and regulations for the conduct of the efficient operations of the department. So in having that kind of authority and in structuring the Guam Police Department accordingly, as the Chief of Police and several chiefs of police in the past, we do have an executive security section. And that particular section there, and that particular subsection and the unit directive, the officers assigned to that detail or that section do provide the security for that, for the First Lady, the Governor, and the Lieutenant Governor. So several weeks ago, the First Lady needed to travel to the country, to London. And in preparing to do that, the Guam Police Department reached out to the Guam Homeland Security, the Office of Civil Defense, and the administrator of the Office of Civil Defense, and the Mariana Regional Fusion Center. And we asked for a threat assessment to be done for that region of the world, for London, for the United Kingdom. And in receiving that threat assessment, we found out, or we saw that the threat assessment was critical in that the national security threat level for American citizens or U.S. citizens traveling there was critical. So we made the decision, I made the ultimate decision to increase the First Lady's security detail from 2, which is normally what we provide, to 3. And again, I will tell you, in talking to the director of the Marianas Regional Fusion Center, the Homeland Security, the Guam Homeland Security Advisor, I made the ultimate decision to increase her security detail from 2 to 3. And again, it was for the purpose of accomplishing our mission, specifically outlined in Chapter 77 of Title 10. And I will tell you, and I will tell the people of Guam, that in doing so, in reaching out to Homeland Security, in reaching out to the Mariana Regional Fusion Center, the Guam Police Department was in fact being very frugal. We were being judicious with the monies that we had. We were streamlining, and we were being efficient with this process of providing security and being able to meet the mission of the Guam Police Department as set forth, number 1, in statute, as well as our general orders and our guidelines. So I just wanted to throw that out. I wanted to be very clear and address that matter up front, because I know that it wasn't a matter that was raised in the past by several media outlets. So I kind of wanted to address that up front before we talked about our Uniform Crime Report. Okay? So now I'd like to transition into the Uniform Crime Report. And as I posture to provide this discussion, I'd just like to introduce some of the staff that I have with me. To my left is my acting police commander and the Bureau Chief for Operations Bureau, Major Manny Chong. To my right is the Bureau Chief for Services Bureau, Major Andrew Kitawa. And to Major Chong's left is the Bureau Chief for Investigations Bureau, Captain Cristobal Castro. So again, the purpose for this morning's press conference is to talk, in fact, about the Guam Police Department's 2016 Uniform Crime Report. Now, I just wanted to throw out that is a publication that comes out every year. It comes out annually. It's to discuss crime over the year from January through December. Now, I will admit to you that the Guam Police Department has a requirement to complete that particular report. So as we work through the issues in the Guam Police Department and some of the challenges we're facing, I will tell you that although the report's a little bit late, it is complete, and the report and the stats that are the statistics that are indicated in that are consistent with the citizen-centric report and other reports that we produce on a daily basis. So I just wanted to put that out, that the UCR has been on our website for anybody to take a look at with regards to the crime that is happening on our island and how we analyze that crime. So with these thoughts in mind, I'd like to put out first that as we discuss the crime trend, the 5-year crime trend here in Guam from 2012 to 2016, I'd like to kind of preface this conversation with a few points. And number one, I think it's important to know that the Guam Police Department has transitioned from traditional policing to community policing. And I bring that up because that has an impact on crime as we analyze it and as we take a look at it. Additionally, the Guam Police Department has developed and implemented a 2-year strategic plan. Again, that has an impact on our ability to, number one, deal with crime on our island, and it impacts how we take a look at crime and how we move forward with regards to that. I will tell you that, that the data that we collect is driven so that we have the appropriate distribution of police services throughout the department, so that we are managing our forces correctly based on the crime that is happening on our island and the needs of the community, because we have transitioned to community policing. Now, in addition to that, I will tell you that we take a look at the demographics of crime. And what I mean by that are we take a look at the types of crimes that are being committed and by the population that's committing the crime. So there's a lot of things that we take into consideration when we put the Uniform Crime Report together, and as we pose or we posture ourselves for an analysis of the 5-year crime trend. Okay. Now, in doing that, I will tell you that we do see some strengths and opportunities in conducting this assessment of crime. The first one I'd like to talk about as far as the strength is something that is very near and dear to the Guam Police Department, and we see that with all the initiatives of our Medina Community Policing Strategy. Again, that is a definite strength of the Guam Police Department. It's definitely an opportunity because it allows us to collaborate with the community even more so. It allows us to reach out to the community and police the community the way the community wants to be policed. That by analyzing crime and taking all these strengths and opportunities into consideration, this increases our budget efficiency and allows us to provide better services to the people of Guam. Another strength and opportunity that we realize is post-compliance. We now have Public Law 3232 that mandates that the Guam Police Department be compliant with the peace officer standards and training. So as we take a look at that, we see that again as a strength and opportunity in being able to more effectively deal with crime on our island. And lastly, the last strength and opportunity that we see is the objectives of the several task forces that we've put together. The Mandania Drug Task Force, our Alcohol Suppression Task Force, as well as our Robbery Suppression Task Force. So we see all those as, again, opportunities for us to more effectively deal with crime. And I bring that out as a preface when I start to talk about the discussion of the crime trend. So specifically, when we talk about the crime on our island, I want to talk first about, number one, Part 1 crimes. Now, Part 1 crimes, as we have published it in the Uniform Crime Report, consist of homicide, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. So homicide has dropped from 8 cases to 3 cases between 2015 and 2016. Forcible rape has dropped from 160 cases to 103 cases between 2015 and 2016. Robbery has dropped to burglary, of which the Part 1 property crimes include burglary, larceny theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson, burglary has seen an uptick. Now, while burglary has increased from 1,211 cases to 1,612 cases, it has dropped from 2,304 cases in 2012 to 1,612 cases in 2016. And that's a difference of 692 cases. So again, I want to be clear about that from 1 year to the next year, from 15 to 16, we did see an increase. But when you look at the trend, the overall trend in crime, which is a 5-year trend from 2012 to 2016, there is a downward trend. And that trend, we see a 692 case difference in that downward trend. With regards to larceny theft has dropped from 2,251 cases in 2015 to 1,866 cases in 2016. Motor vehicle theft has seen an increase by 34 cases from 222 cases in 2015 to 256 cases in 2016. Now there is still a significant decline over that 5-year trend where we had 454 cases in 2012. So again, motor vehicle theft, like burglary, did see an uptick from 2015 to 2016. However, in looking at the 5-year trend from 2012 to 2016, we did see a decrease of about 198 cases with regards to motor vehicle theft. Now lastly, with Part 1 property crimes, regarding arson, the arson cases have dropped from 12 cases in 2015 to 7 cases in 2016. So in looking at the bigger picture, the totality of the picture with regards to violent crime and property crime on Guam, total Part 1 crime in 2016 shows a decline of 799 cases from 2012, 1,110 cases from 2013, 338 cases from 2014, and 306 cases from 2015. Now, I think it's important to note that when we talk about Part 1 crimes, those crimes that I just mentioned, we consider that in the Guam Police Department, and I, as the Chief of Police and previous Chiefs of Police, consider that to what we to be called index crimes. An index crime is, in GPD, is defined as a crime that kind of lays the landscape for crime on our island. It gives us a picture, it gives us a pulse or a sense of crime on our island. It doesn't mean that Part 1 crimes or Part 2 crimes are any less a crime than Part 1 crimes are, or any other crime for that matter. But we use Part 1 crimes as an index to be able to give us a rough idea or a general sense of crime on our island. So I think it was important, or that it is important, to note that we use that as an index crime. Now, to talk about Part 2 crime, I will tell you that in 2016, Part 2 crimes rose by over 800 cases, or 16%, due to a spike in disorderly conduct or disturbance cases from 49 in 2015 to 913 in 2016. Now that is significant. I do want to discuss this matter. I will tell you that the mechanisms in the Guam Police Department that we use or we utilize for capturing data regarding disorderly conduct and disturbance calls, which are both considered crimes based on Title IX of the Guam Code annotated, they are lumped together. Now, as we are going through a system upgrade of our law enforcement records management system, we are looking to separate that so that we can analyze that a little bit better. So, although there was an increase, and I will tell you, and I will admit that there was that increase, that spike is because of the combination of disorderly conduct and disturbances. So as we move forward and we are gathering data for 2017, as we come together, or as we start to put together the 2017 Uniform Crime Report, you're going to see more definitive information with regards to disorderly conduct and disturbance cases. Okay, they include crash investigations for motor vehicle crashes that occur on the roadways or in parking lots or what have you. And then there are also those non-crime, non-crash related matters. Again, a mere call for service. A person is in need of some kind of service. A cat got stuck in somebody's tree, hypothetically. So if they call the Guam Police Department, we capture that in a call for service. And I think that it's important that we understand that there is a difference in the crime committed and reported and analyzed and the calls for service. And I just wanted to talk about that. And I will tell you that the calls for service are down from 40,035 calls in 2012 to 36,310 calls in 2016. So we do analyze that kind of information, but I do want to put out there that as we look at calls for service, there is a difference. And even in just the calls for service, we see a downward trend in the amount of calls that are coming in with regards to the service that the people want from the Guam Police Department. Okay, as we continue to transition forward in this discussion of the crime trend, I think it's important that we do provide some kind of discussion on the demographics of crime and how the Guam Police Department understands that demographics. Now, first off, I will tell you that GPD does recognize that our island has a very diverse population, and that diversity we take a look at very closely. We look at the ethnicities that exist on our island. We look at the persons that are involved in crime, those that are potentially arrested, those who have committed crimes, and we analyze that. So we do recognize that. And I will tell you that in understanding the demographics, and it's important that I throw that out, because by not understanding that there is a specific demographic that exists in the criminal justice system, as the Guam Police Department deals with this, we see that we collaborate with DOC, we collaborate with the Attorney General's office, as well as the Judiciary of Guam to understand what those demographics are. I will always tell you that we go back to our strategy of policing to be able to deal with that demographic, understanding the diversity and the fact that we have an organic population on our island and we have a migratory population on our island. We do a lot of outreach, and we use our strategy of policing, the Mandania Community Policing Strategy, to be able to affect that. Understanding what the dynamics are or the demographics are, we use outreach to be able to affect the demographics in crime. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we do understand there is a demographic that exists, and we use our strategy of policing to be able to affect that particular demographic. Now, continuing on with that, I will tell you that there is a tool or resource that we use in dealing with this crime. And that resource or that tool is called a police response matrix. And that matrix is a table that we put together based on the resources that we have, based on the demographics of the population, based on a number of different factors like the calls for services and things of that nature that we put together as a matrix for responding to the needs of the people, responding to calls for services, responding to crimes that have been committed or crimes in progress. Now, I will tell you that no matter what jurisdiction you look at, whether it's nationwide or even around the world, there is no set standard per se with regards to response, a particular response matrix. What we see in the Guam Police Department, because our strategy of policing is community policing, we are responding specifically to the needs of the people. We are looking at a general sense, from a general sense of minimizing our response time. So the matrix that we have is broken down by the different precincts. We have 4 precincts, and based on the number of personnel we have, the resources we have, and the population that they service, we figure out, or we try and determine the amount of time it would take for a police officer to respond to these particular calls for service or the crime that has been committed. So I think that's important that we put that out, that the Guam Police Department does recognize that in its strategy of policing, there is a methodology going forward. There is a tool and a resource that we use called a police response matrix to be able to respond to that crime. And I just wanted to put that out, that they are related to each other, and that this does have an impact on crime and how we analyze crime. So I just wanted to throw that out. I also like to lastly talk about growth in the Guam Police Department. And one would ask, how does this growth affect crime? And the discussion that we're having this morning, I will tell you that there are direct linkages with the growth in the Guam Police Department to the effectuating of crime or the dealing with crime here on our island. First off, I like to talk about sworn personnel. Sworn personnel in the Guam Police Department has a direct impact on our ability to deal with crime in the Guam Police Department. So as we look at that, and I've said this many times, we reach out to, or we take a look at our budget, we look at the monies that we have, we reach out to the federal government and the cops hiring grant to be able to increase the numbers that we have. Now, understanding that we do have a public law 33163, that allows the Guam Police Department to recruit up to 40 police officers per year out to 2021, which was 5 years from last year. We do work with that. And again, the growth of personnel in the Guam Police Department does have an impact on crime. So we continue to grow our department. On that note, when we think about growth, we think about growth of our capital improvement projects. Things like vehicles, being able to resource our police officers and meet the needs of our community so we can be more visible out in the community. We can have vehicles that police officers can get into and be proactive in policing the community or responding to crime. That is also growth that we are looking at in the Guam Police Department. Growth as far as improving hardware and software in the Guam Police Department equates to a more efficient police department. It equates to efficiency in the service that we provide. So we look at that type of growth as well. And then there's the growth in infrastructure. We have a new central precinct headquarters that's being constructed in Sinanya, as well as a new evidentiary control section that's being constructed up in Jigo. So again, you're going to see a lot of growth in the police department, and we see that as having a direct impact on crime that is committed here. The last thing I'd like to talk about with regards to growth in GPD is our COPS strategy and the validation of that. That is significant to GPD, and I say that because as we take a look at crime and we're analyzing crime, we see that the best way to be able to deal with crime, or better deal with crime, is by policing the people the way the people want to be policed, by allowing the community and the community to be able to collaborate more closely with the Guam Police Department, allowing the police department to embed themselves with the community, understand what their needs are, and police them accordingly. We believe and we feel this will have a more resounding effect on crime on our island. So that being said, I would just like to throw out that those are some of the initiatives that we're looking at. Those are some of the effects that are happening as we look at this 5-year crime trend. But I will tell you, as an overall statement, in analyzing the data, in analyzing the numbers from 2012 to 2016, we definitely do see a downward trend in crime. The 2016 Uniform Crime Report that was published on our website that we've pushed out does further drive home the point that crime is on a downtick. The trend is a downward trend. I will admit to you, in analyzing crime rates and trends, there are peaks and there are valleys. You're going to see some spikes and you're going to see some valleys, where crime drops. When you look at a trend and you analyze all those peaks and valleys, you're going to see that the trend from 2016, from 2012 to 2016, is in fact a downward trend. The UCRs tell us that. The Uniform Crime Reports on an annual basis tell us that. The citizen-centric reports, all of which have to be vetted through the Office of Public Accountability, tell us that. And the reports that we provide to the Bureau of Statistics and Planning, which gets reported to entities in the federal government, like the Department of Interior, all validate what we are saying in that there is a downward trend in crime as we've analyzed that 5-year period from 2012 to 2016. So I'd just like to throw that out there, that we have done that, and we are continuing to analyze this on a daily basis by looking at our uniform crime report, our citizen-centric report, as well as those reports that are given to the federal government. Okay?
So in a downward trend is defined as each successive year being less than the previous year. That is what a downward trend is defined as. According to your reports, in 2012, like you said, in 2013 there was a peak of 10,000, going over 10,053 in 2012. 2013 was 10,148, and then a drop again in 2014 to 9,177 crimes volume in total. Then after that, in 2015, it went back up, slight peak, 9,451, and then 9,957 in 2016, before going to 2017 up to October of 2017, which is 8,416. Wouldn't it be more accurate to state that there is a fluctuating trend? Because as defined, a downward trend is defined as each successive year moving less or being less than the previous year.
I will tell you, when you analyze it from 1 year to the next, then yes, your statement is accurate. Your analogy is accurate. But what we are discussing here is a 5-year trend, analyzing the crime from 2012 to 2016. And in doing so, we see an overall downward trend. Understanding that from 1 year to the next year, there are peaks and there are valleys. But that's on an annual basis from 1 year to the next. What I'm discussing here is an overall 5-year trend.
But even in the 5-year trend, a 5-year trend would mean that you would have to go back all the way to beyond 2011. If you're saying we have to know what the numbers are in 2010 and then in 2005 in order to do a 5-year trend, as you're saying, and see that each on a 5-year basis, each of those successive years have gone down. But as defined, a downward trend is each successive year being less than the previous. So wouldn't it be more accurate to state that as compared to 2011, crime has decreased?
I have stated that in what I've put out this morning, that there are differences and that the trends have dropped from 1 year to the next. So I would say yes, and I would agree with you that the trend does fluctuate up and down. That's from 1 year to the next, as you define it, as you are defining it right now. As we are taking a look at it.
What other way is there to define a downward trend?
Again, as we take a look at this from 2012 to 2016, we are taking a look at that trend at this particular point.
I'm sorry, okay, so can you clarify, are you looking at 2012 and then skipping all the numbers in between and looking at 2016 and saying 2016 is less than 2012?
No, we're saying that the numbers from 2012, taking into consideration 13, 14, 15, and 16, the trend is a downward trend, considering all the variables that affect that.
But how is, if in 2011 it was 8,912 crime volume total, and then in 2012 it was 10,000, how does that go downward? I mean, even in 2013, it's still at the 10,000 mark.
I understand
so
that.
How is that downward trend?
In the analysis of crime, you have to take into consideration all the different variables that affect that. So whether from 1 year to the next, it goes up, it fluctuates up, and then the next year it fluctuates down. When you look at the totality of the picture from a holistic point of view, all things considered, all variables that affect crime altogether, the trend is in fact downward. And again, we're validating that more and more with the information that we're getting from our statisticians at our planning, research, and development section.
Okay, so there's a different...
Does your crime report take into account drug crimes?
It does. It does as part of our Part 2 crimes. Yes, Andrew? Yes.
Did you discuss that? Did I miss that?
Well, I kind of generalized Part 2 crimes altogether. The Uniform Crime Report does specifically talk about the drugs, the crimes that are directly related to drugs. For the sake of the discussion, I discussed it, part one crime, violent crimes, part one property crimes, and then part two, all other crimes.
Can you say how bad or good? Is there an uptick or downtick in drug crimes, drug-related crimes?
Andrew, do you have any specifics on that?
It's listed in the UCR. The UCR does have a special report, one of which does describe drug abuse violations in greater detail than what you would look at in a trend. But I like to put out, Chief, that the Mandania Drug Task Force is creating cases, okay, that would otherwise go unreported. So if there is an uptick in the amount of arrests for drug violations and the amount of drug abuse violation reports that are coming in, that's because there's an increase in activity in that one particular section. And that, of course, as the Chief has said before, is a task force objective, one of which objectives throughout the past couple of years have been a very useful tool. And there are other government agencies involved in it as well. And as you've heard over the last several months, task force operations have done well for us, but they also increase and may at some point be confused with the amount of crimes reported to the police, when in fact it's the police actually creating those cases.
So to be specific then, Crystal, the amount of cases that we're handling is because of the increased activity that's going on. Does it mean that there are more drugs on our island? Does it mean that there are more violations on their island? Not necessarily. Again, just the increase that one could perceive, one could think that there's an increase of drug activity on our island. Is not necessarily that there's an increase of drug activity, is there's an increase in the amount of interdiction that's happening. It's the police department increasing the interdiction based on those needs of the community, because that's specifically what the community want, that you see a perceived uptick. Not necessarily, and again, those are all things that are listed in that specific special report.
Chief, if I may, so we're getting more input from the community based on our policing strategy. So as Major Kaliwa stated, it does give us more avenues to look into the interdiction by the community support who does reach out to Mandania Drug Task Force or a precinct for that matter. So that information is vetted and is shared with Mandania Drug Task Force. And there we initiate reports to begin our interdiction, and there you see the arrests. So it's a community effort as well. It's not just Mandania alone. We thank the Chief and his initiatives that brought us on the right track to address the interdiction of drugs.
Thank you, sir.
So the Mandania Drug Task Force, according to the Governor's Office, has seized over $1 million in drugs since the creation in February of 2017. I was provided some documents regarding the numbers that the Mandania Drug Task Force has brought in as far as drugs is concerned up to December of 2017. Those numbers are only at 800,000 in drugs. Now, the over $1 million reported to the Governor's Office and to the public, does that take into account the money seized as part of drugs?
Yes, it does. All assets and forfeitures related to that are incorporated in that.
As drugs?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's not a separate, it wouldn't be a separate, drugs and money.
No, it's
Back to my last question, can you define what a downward trend is as you would use it in your reports?
Chief, can I?
yes,
interject?
absolutely.
Right. I just want to make it clear, right, that whatever fluctuations you see in crime trend, what we really look at is the line of best fit, right, and it correlates to a negative correlation to crime over the 5-year trend. We're looking at that as a means to discuss if crime is actually dropping. But we want to be very careful, right? Because when we talk about crime, there are victims behind every single crime, and we don't want to miss anything. We're very sensitive and empathetic about what's going on the island, and we do our very best to drop that crime rate. And this is the reason why COPS has been so successful in that negative correlation.
I don't disagree that there has been a decrease, but in in how a downward trend is actually defined, I mean, if you look it up, it will tell you what the definition is. I mean, if there's another way to define a downward trend, then please explain. But I would think it would be more accurate to state that there is a fluctuation in crime volume total over the years, but it
Right.
has decreased
Right.
since 2011.
And that's that negative correlation I'm talking about, as well as all the very complex things that come into an analysis when if you're inferring something in a particular crime category, there's a lot that happens when you consider, variables that need to be considered in even just basic statistics and analysis. It's very, very complex, and it's not a lot that we can do here in our agency and other agencies. We also reach out to people over at the University of Guam, students and professors, to help us analyze these things like a police service matrix. That's been vetted by professors. These are things that we bring up there, and we make sure that when we ask a question and we expect variations of answers about crime that's occurring on the island, that it doesn't just include one person's opinion, because there are a variation of answers that come out when we talk about statistics. So we're very careful when we talk about this, and sensitive to the fact that every single crime, there's at least one victim involved. So we really try not to generalize, but this is what we are left to try to analyze with the limited resources that we have here in the department.
Can we talk a bit about manpower first?
Sure.
All the task forces available. How many are available for regular patrols, and the precincts? We have heard about shortages in the precincts, and sometimes residents will complain about their calls not being taken on time.
Okay.
We'll talk about that today.
Our neighborhood patrol division holds at roughly 30 or so patrol officers per precinct. Again, Major Chong is the bureau chief and the acting police commander who's in charge specifically of that. So as we take a look at the number of police officers, the calls for service, the amount of crime that's happening, we apportion that accordingly. We look at neighborhood patrol division operations as the main effort in the Guam Police Department. So that being said, that's where our focus is at. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where, aside from our records and ID section, where the Guam Police Department interacts with the community first and foremost. So we posture ourselves to be able to deal with that. So to answer your question directly, we average, again, about 30 police officers per precinct. And again, that's all dependent on the calls for service at that particular precinct, the number of cases that are handled, the number of arrests that are handled, the population in that particular precinct, and we apportion that accordingly. And again, how many police officers we put in our neighborhood patrol division versus our criminal investigations division, forensic science, and anywhere else in the Guam Police Department is all dependent on that. But again, and the focus is neighborhood patrol division, which again, like I said, is what we consider our main effort.
Chief, if I could add more to that.
Sure.
These task forces, we didn't tap onto the patrol personnel. They are officers from our Special Operations Division with the Alcohol Suppression Task Force. That was a holiday season Alcohol Suppression Task Force. We borrowed, we had officers from the Department of Parks and Rec and Department of Agriculture. So that task force did their time. Holiday season's over. Everybody went back to their agencies. With the Robbery Suppression Task Force, we had the Criminal Investigation Section, we had Highway Patrol, and we also had Special Operations Division. Nobody on patrol was tapped in. We weren't taken away from patrol to add on to these task forces, because like the chief said, we need to make sure that we have personnel to handle the most basic of calls, basic of the community's needs.
So again, we assume no risk when it comes to patrol operations. We put our resources in that direction so that all other sections are not adversely impacted. But again, we focus on our main effort. Okay, Crystal.
You say you average about 30 officers per precinct. What can people at home expect? How long could they expect a police officer to show up if they called for help?
Again, that would depend on the the type of call that's coming in, the time of the week. So there, like Major Kitagwa said, there's a number of different variables that affect that, which is why we go back to the number of personnel that we have. Again, I've talked about the police response matrix in several different forums, to include the legislature as we continue to lobby for more funding in the Guam Police Department. But a general rule of thumb that we are looking at, or a goal that we are trying to get to, is lower than 5 minutes response time. Now, what affects that, Crystal, is if we have X number of officers that come in for duty that day, not on sick leave or not able to come in, if we have multiple major calls for service in progress, you have people rioting, there's a riot in progress, and there's 2 or 3 of them going on, that would require a higher volume of police officers to respond. So what we tell the public is it's a matter of prioritizing. We work very diligently to meet their needs, but we respond to those particular calls and what those needs are. So as a general rule of thumb, and again, there is no set standard per se, none that we can find across the nation or around the world that says this is really a set response time. We are looking to try and affect a 5 minute or less response time based on the number of personnel that we have and the resources available to be able to effectuate that, notwithstanding any other major calls for service in progress at the time those calls are made.
What would be an example of high priority and low priority?
Well, if there's a homicide in progress, somebody calls that there was a home invasion and they call 911 because there's potentially a homicide that's happening. Those we would, or an armed robbery in progress that involves people shooting. Those kinds of calls we would take other calls not as high as a priority. You know, when you look at the protection of life and property, we take a look at that. What are those calls that have a direct impact on that? That's what the community, as we've reached out to the community, has said is a big need and a big priority for them. That which affects life and property. So we work towards that. So an example would be a robbery in progress, armed robbery in progress, shots fired. Those things take a front seat and are on the front burner to our response to the community versus, a car got broken into. Or somebody stole a bicycle out of somebody's garage. Those types of calls, again, will be secondary to a call for service in progress, which is violent in nature.
And going back to the trends, I did notice most of violent crime is going down from 2015, I think.
Yes.
But like you said, your property crimes are almost even.
Almost even, and I would, as I admitted, when you take a look at burglary, I believe there was an uptick in the burglary,
Right.
as well as the motor vehicle theft. There was an uptick in that.
Do we know an explanation for that?
Well, those are things that we're analyzing right now. I don't have any hard explanations as to why exactly, and those are things that we're taking a look at. And we continue to analyze that. We continue to work with the community in trying to understand that. So those are things that we will be able to put out to the people of Guam as to why, and then figure out, more importantly, not just so much why that crime was committed, but how we can prevent that
Could it
as
be
we
due
move
to-
forward.
To meth and other drugs.
Now, if I can interject here.
Sure.
Okay, getting back to your question earlier, another thing that we take into consideration as far as the high priority, as far as the call is places that historically they assault police officers. So if we have a riot at a certain location that we know that people throw rocks or throw cans at the police officers, actually assault police officers, that becomes a higher priority. We're going to have more officers respond to that location. Okay, so that affects everybody else's calls. Okay, so that's my interjection on that question. And regarding the uptick in property crimes. Okay, when I was doing my master's program at the University of Guam, we did this one research project, and I was informed by one of the people that was contributing to the project, that a lot of these criminals want to get arrested because the way they live out in the public, it's really bad. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't have a roof. They don't have TV. They don't have a toilet. They don't have a shower. Okay, so they do these crimes, and they don't care if they get arrested. Okay, because being in DOC, being confined in DOC, is much better than being out in public. So that is one reason why people commit crimes. Now, for other criminals, okay, we haven't, like the chief said, we're still researching that. Okay, but that is one reason that research has been done that people cause crimes or commit crimes.
One last question?
Yes, Rick.
Crime, you're saying crime is going down.
Yes. The
Question
trend is down.
The trend
is down.
Question is, do you have enough men on the force to keep that trend going, or do you need more? And if so, if you don't have enough men, at what percentage is your manpower now? Is it 80% of what you need, or is it at 70% of what you need? And will the upcoming class that's graduating, will that fill that void?
You know, Rick, that's a very interesting question, kind of a loaded question, if you will, for lack of a better term. But I will tell you that when you take a look at what is in Chapter 77 of Title 10, which is the municipal policing section of that part of the law, there's an actual equation. And that's where we as the Guam Police Department have reached out to our elected leaders to let them know that based on the population, based on that section of Chapter 77 of Title 10, the Guam Police Department really should be in the ballpark of about 527. And I've said that, for the record, on many occasions in front of several different legislatures. I've been the chief of police now for going on the third budget season now. And at each one of them, I specifically addressed that, Rick, that based on that part of the law, we really should be at 527. And it's because of that initiative that we reached out to some of our elected leaders who allowed us or who introduced a bill that passed into law, which is Public Law 33163. That law was passed that for the purpose of allowing GPD that kind of growth. So to answer your question, where are we? We are at about 300 or so police officers of what we say we should have, 527. So as you can see, we admit, and everybody's aware of that. And I've said this at many town hall meetings and on many different forums that the Guam Police Department is dealing with resource shortfalls. Major Kirigua had mentioned that there are challenges we're dealing with. And those are all initiatives that we're working towards. Not only are we working or dealing, as we work with the monies that have been appropriated to us, part of that is looking to be more judicious with the money so that we can look at recruiting more people and hiring more people. So where we are at now, we are able to continue to affect crime so that we can continue with this downward trend. But more so than the police officer, because I've said this many times. You could put a police officer in every street corner of every village on this island. Will there be crime? Absolutely. Absolutely there will be crime. And not just on Guam, but any jurisdiction around the world for that matter. Crime will always be there. What really works more so than just the police officer out there is this collaboration of keeping the community safe. The Neighborhood Watch program is the community assisting the police, keeping the community safe. So although we have a resource shortfall, a personnel shortfall, the community works with the police department, the crime trend continues to go down. So I would say that we are holding fast. We are working towards those initiatives. That's why we're doing all this. That's why we have this discussion to say that with our strategy of policing and how we've analyzed crime, all things taken into consideration, we do feel that with the initiatives we're working on, we can hold the line so that crime does continue to drop. Okay, now, all things being taken into consideration, again, all variables being considered. So that's where we're at with regards to that. We continue to press forward with Public Law 33163. And again, you know, we will continue to work with our elected leaders and our policymakers to be able to affect that positively. And then again, we reach out to the federal government with the Community Area Policing Service federal grants that we get for FY18. It gives us over $1 million to be able to recruit for 15 new police officers. So we continue that. Now, to answer your question specifically about the 10 police officer trainees that are getting ready to graduate tomorrow, again, they will be infused directly out to patrol. And again, like I've said many times, even one police officer coming or going in the Guam Police Department does have an impact. So these 10 will make a difference when they graduate tomorrow. They graduate tomorrow evening, as a matter of fact. When they do graduate, they will go out on patrol and they will have an impact. You will see an increased police service or better police service to our people.
Just unrelated to resources, how many officers are actually on duty at the same time per precinct?
Manny, do we have that definitive number?
On average, I guess.
We have at least 4 officers, 1 supervisor, 1 desk watch, and 4 officers. That's the least. Okay. We average between 1 and 5, 1 and 6. Okay. But once they get close to 1 and 4, or once they get below 1 and 4, they activate people to make sure we have at least 4 officers patrolling.
And that concludes today's press conference. Thank you for being here. Any
Thank you very
additional
much,
questions
ladies and
regards
gentlemen.
to this, please let me know and I will forward it up the chain. Thank you.
Thank you.